Hello everyone, my name is Aram and welcome back to my channel. Before the start of this video, there were two subjects I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about a Ponzi scheme and about the limits of globalization. I did a poll on my Instagram where over 100 people answered that they wanted to hear about the Ponzi scheme. So this is what we are going to talk about today. Before the start of this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. The link is down below. It really helps me out a lot and it shows me that you actually care about my content and you actually enjoy it. In this video we are going to see what is a Ponzi scheme, how to recognize one, and if we are actually living in a whole world based on a Ponzi scheme. I thought this was really interesting and that it would bring more than just discuss some examples. I'll link some examples in my description where people actually talk about the actual Ponzi schemes that have happened in our world. So please, I invite you to check them out, it's really interesting. And now let's get on with the video. You have probably heard about the Ponzi schemes like the Madoff or the Bitconnect one. The first one was a really popular one, it was the biggest one so far. And the other one, there was a bunch of memes around it, like this one. Bitconnect! So what is a Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is also called robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's a pyramidal system where the old investors are paid with the money of the new ones. So if we take our example, Paul would be at the top of the pyramid and Peter would be at the bottom. We are robbing Peter to pay back Paul. The system is unsustainable because it creates an infinite debt and it cannot exist because it's in a constant need of new entrants. But for example, let's say if every person that enters the scheme invited 6 other people to join it would only take 13 stages to be over the population of Earth today. You're not able to pay everyone back. So at some point it crashes and people lose their money. So in order to get new investors, these schemes incentivize the old one to invite their friends, their family, or just people who they know. They can incentivize these people with higher return per month, or they are paying you higher percentages, or just a fixed amount of money paid to you every month. So now, how do we recognize these schemes? There are several factors that can show you that this scheme is a scam. First of all, you're offered really high returns that you could find nowhere else. These high returns are also promised to you with no risk or a really low risk for you. You can see that it actually seems sketchy and it seems almost unreal to be true. Also, your money can be locked for some period of time because if everyone decides to get their money back at the same time, the Ponzi scheme cannot work anymore because they have to pay everyone back at the same time. And the final factor that can show you that it's an actual scheme, it's the fact that there is no real project behind it. You don't really know where your money goes, you don't really know what they do with it, you just know that you earn some money from it. You've probably seen these guys on Instagram that show off their life with their travel and with their money and their new cars, etc. And what they always use is the word financial freedom. And doesn't it remind you of something?
Do you dream of becoming financially independent, but struggle every month just to pay your bills?
So these people that are most targeted are those with a huge network. I did a video about the network effect, so if you want to check this out, the link will be in the description. And so basically, the bigger your network, the more people you'll be able to attract to this system. So the longer it will be able to sustain itself. So now, just to recap what I've just said, a Ponzi scheme is an unsustainable scheme where old investors are paid back by the new investors, right? And doesn't it remind you of something? Now if we think about it, is our whole world based on the Ponzi scheme? So to talk about our world, I have 2 different examples. So let's start with the first one. The population growth is something that you cannot really see why it could be a Ponzi scheme, right? But what I have learned during my studies is that the bigger your population, the better you are, the more working force you have, and the bigger the GDP of your country is, so the better the economy goes. And what I also learned is that the countries which have the declining population or an aging population are doing really badly. But why? The fact that people are aging today is that the country will have to pay the retirement plans or the healthcare for them. So these are some expenses that have to be paid from the government. But how does the government get their money? From taxes, obviously. So here we can see that the working population is paying for the ones who have worked before. So the new entrants are paying for the older ones. Here we have the first characteristic of a Ponzi scheme. The older ones are paid by the new ones. And the second one would be the unsustainability of the system. And this is where we can come back to what we said before and see that in the aging countries, what we see is that the government has to pay for the people. And thanks to the medical advancements, thanks to everything that is happening today, we are living longer. So we have to sustain these people for a longer time, so we have to pay more for it. So if you don't have your working population, which is growing at the same rate as your older population, which are not able to work anymore, and if you cannot pay the elderly, then there is a crisis going on, the prices go up, the taxes go up, so they have to adapt for this working population being smaller than the population that has to be sustained by the country. And we have this problem in Russia. In Russia, our population is aging because people are either leaving the country or the fertility is not enough to match the death rate or to match the people which are leaving. So we can see a negative growth in our population. At this point of time, a country can do many things. What happened in Russia in 2018 was that the retirement age went from 60 to 65 years for men and from 55 to 60 years for women. It has been increased by 5 years. It's not something which is really small. You're working for 5 more years during your whole life. It's something to be considered. We can also see these stupid policies: one child for your dad, one child for your mom, and one child for your country to increase this fertility rate. We had the same policies during USSR period, and I think that it's not something that can be implemented today. Some other countries create more opportunities to increase tourism or to increase people that are actually coming to the country to earn some money to increase its population. And so this is the second factor that we have just seen, the unsustainability. If the country cannot pay all that they owe to the old people, then they will have to somehow get more money from the new entrants or get more new entrants. So this is where the unsustainability comes back. The population growth was the first example that I decided to take for this video. But what if we think about something that has been really popular during the last years? What if we think about the climate change and the global warming? Last year, in 2019, the 29th of July, we have consumed all the resources that the Earth was able to offer to us. And this limit is going to reduce even more and more throughout the years because our population is growing, and so we are taking more resources from Earth than we are actually able to get. What is happening is that my generation and the generations after me will have to repay the debt that our parents, our grandparents, etc. have created. The people who did not really care about the resources or about the environment before have created this huge debt that is actually really serious today and that we have to face today. And we are the ones, we are the new entrants into this world that will have to find a solution to it. And this is where we can see that we can directly link it to Ponzi scheme as well, because we are the new ones who are going to pay the debt to the old ones. And also it's unsustainable. This is why we are talking about sustainable development for our businesses. So what I have learned during my classes and during my school years is that bigger is better. The question that we have to ask ourselves today is bigger actually better? Do we actually need more people on Earth even though we are already facing the problems with overconsumption or overpopulation? What would it bring to us to consume even more resources? The problem is that with every Ponzi scheme, people are driven by financial interest. And here we can see that the governments are only driven by the increase of their economy. What do we compare between the countries? We are not comparing their efforts to actually reduce their CO2 emissions. What we are comparing is their GDP per capita, or their standard of living. So I think that we really have to pay attention more towards what the countries are actually doing to prevent this Ponzi scheme from collapsing, to see how we could actually stop what is happening today. We have the global crisis going on today, and the only ones responsible for it are us. We are the ones who have created this Ponzi scheme, and we are the ones who are living in it. So it's up to us to find how we can reverse this process and to see how we could actually get out of this Ponzi scheme to create a more sustainable environment for all of us. I would really like to create a discussion around it, and I would really like to have your opinion about what you think about it. So please don't hesitate to leave a comment or to send me a message if you want to talk about it. I would gladly discuss it with you. Once again, please subscribe to my channel if you have enjoyed this content. It really helps me out a lot. I would like to thank you for sticking with me and see you next time. Thank you for watching.